It's the weekend again. We're really hoping for rain. I went out this morning to the local swap meet. It's about 20 minutes up the road. This one's quite good. There's two that are pretty close to me that I can go to. The other one's about an hour away. And this one is definitely the better one. I find more interesting things there. So I went for a drive this morning and this is what I managed to find. First thing I found within like 2 minutes of going in were these little side marker lamps. Little Lucas ones. These are quite nice period lamps, always very handy. So I picked those up. I found a, this will be a UVA carburetor, or the body at least, most of it's there. It's missing the fuel bulb. But the reason I wanted this is because this is the same as what's on the Riley at the moment. So that gives me a nice spare carburetor body. These are getting harder to find. This one doesn't seem to be too much wear in it, which is good. So I got that. I got this old gas cylinder. This was $10. And it's an old NZIG, probably CO2 or welding gas. Because I've been looking out for one of these, because I think a few times I've mentioned using my existing gas bottles as anvils for metalworking. So that curve up on the front of the Riley guards I did over one of those bottles, and I always feel a bit bad doing that, or a bit worried that I'm going to break the valve off or something and ruin the bottle. So this one is, I'm guessing it's an expired bottle. Quite sure how the guy had it to sell, because I think normally these would go back to the place you rent them from, although you can buy your own bottles. So I think this one is expired, basically. There's probably a date on it somewhere. Yeah, not really sure. But $10, I'll probably take the valve off it so I know it's not one of my good ones. There's nothing in it, it's empty obviously. And that just makes a really handy former. So things like the curve on the corners of the bonnet, front of the guards, anything like that, it just makes a really handy anvil. So like I say, I've been looking out for one of those for a long time. And it happened to be there and it was cheap. And I got a number plate lamp. This is a painted one, not a chrome one, but it's got the proper made in England glass. This is what I'm going to use as the high stop lamp on the Riley, I think. This one I'll clean up and I'll paint, and they can sort of be mounted up here somewhere where it won't look too out of place. I'd rather have painted than chrome, because chrome isn't quite right for this period of car. So I think that was $5. All of this stuff was cheap. So I think it was $10 for the carburetor. I also found this, which I wasn't sure I was going to get, and then I thought, if you don't get that, you'll never see another one like it. It's a foot switch in the shape of a foot. It sounds like there's a micro switch in there. It's all rusty and horrible, but that's pretty cool, I thought. It's got an adjustable stop in there. It's covered in rust, but I'll soak it in evaporust. So it says starting switch and speed regulator. So I was just going to use it as a simple on-off switch for my bead roller. I could replace that switch with this one, just because I thought it was pretty neat. So I think that'll clean up really nicely. I have no idea where it's made or anything. I like how the label's crooked. Kind of reminds me of those throttle pedals you used to get in various cars. I think in the 70s they were popular, weren't they? I thought that was cool. The little lamps, and I got this, and this is something else I've been looking out for a long time, is an aviation style torch, a nice light torch, oxyacetylene torch, aviator jet, St. Louis MO, is that Missouri? Not really sure, not up on my US geography. but nice little torch. This was the most expensive thing I bought, and this was $20, including the hoses and the flashback arresters. Just these arresters, if you buy them new, are $60 each. So this was an absolute bargain. They were actually in a box full of old regulators and bits and pieces. They wanted $50 for the whole box, but I didn't want to take a whole box of old crappy bits and pieces. I just wanted this, so they just sold me that. So yeah, $20, absolute bargain. I think I could probably just hook this up and it'll work. But yeah, nice little light, easy to use torch. I'm not sure what size tip is on there. I don't know if I can get other tips for it. But definitely well worth going. Even this old carburetor, it's got a needle in it. The dash pop's not all gummed up, and that's the proper period. Well, slightly out of period. It's a bit later. Reversing light. So very, very cool. I want to see if I can get this valve off this cylinder. I'm not quite sure how these come off. It's definitely empty. There's nothing in it. And I might put a different color of paint on it or something, just so I don't ever get it muddled up with my actual rental bottles. So clean those up, and the body, this is kind of set quite nicely, the penetrol, so I think I can flip that over now, get the front end back on. I can probably get the front forks back on, and I'm not sure with the wiring. I think I could probably assemble everything and do the wiring while it's all assembled. I don't think there's anything that's going to be too complicated to get to, because there isn't really that much wiring to it. I do need to fix up the switch, clean this, just check that's okay. But there's the wiring loom for it. Yeah, everything's actually numbered. I could get some of those cable numbering things that clip on to show where all the different cables go, but this matches that exactly, so figuring out the wiring won't be too hard. And I still haven't actually figured out what diameter this cable is. I'm not even sure where the ends of it are. There we go. Yeah, so that's 7-core trailer cable. Made in Australia. 0.64 millimeter squared, so that's probably not thick enough for a lot of the wiring. It'll do for most of it, but I might go look up what that is. Cable, 7-core, 2.5 millimeter. Yeah, I'll look up what the specs on that are. So, flip that over and get the steering back on. Got the front forks and guard back on. One thing to note with the penetrol, if you get runs in the penetrol, I had a lot of really thick runs on the outside where it had dripped through. You can wipe that off with mineral turpentine, and that'll take the penetrol off but not remove any paint. Doesn't even remove any of the grime, but it'll take the penetrol off. It sort of dissolves it, and then you can gently wipe over it again with fresh penetrol. That might be some there I need to rub off. But the front forks, you might be able to see there's a bit of a twist on the fork, And that's how you actually install them, because the springs are all that are holding the two halves of the fork together. You put these in so they're not straight. They're actually at about a 20-degree angle, and then when you put the wheel on, they'll twist, and that keeps the spring under tension. Getting the bearings in is tricky because they're just floating. I turned it upside down and put these bearings in first, so drop this down from the top, and I set this up on my stand so everything was level, so the bearings were all going in level. Smear of grease around everything, of course. You don't need too much grease, you just need enough to sort of coat things. And then I was able to push this through from the top, and I put my mole grips on the end so that I could flip it over without this dropping out again. And then same sort of thing, I sort of balanced it, blocked it up so that this was horizontal, and then grease in there, and then the grease holds the balls in place. But you have to be really careful with the top one, because if the shaft isn't centralized in the bearing, if it's off to one side, there's enough of a gap on the other side that you can drop the ball bearings down into the tube. So as long as you keep it centralized, they can't fall in, but if it moves, you can drop them in. I managed not to do that, which was pretty good. Then these just come up through. I found a ER32 collet spanner from my mill, fits these perfectly, almost perfectly, good enough to do them up tight. This is done up tight, and you can see there's not a lot of clearance on things, but like the Riley, you can see that side where it's actually rubbed in the past. So I should now be able to reinstall the front wheel. I think that'll be the next thing. Have the front wheel back on, and I've got a ratchet strap at the end there to hold the back of the body down so I can lift the front wheel off the ground to make sure it spins, make sure the brake works, which it does. It's all looking really good, apart from the one slight mistake, which maybe people have noticed already. I forgot to bolt the handlebars on. So these go under those two bolts. So I just need to remove them and then get this on. This is the one I had trouble getting them off because there's so little space between the nuts and the frame. The only socket I've got that actually fits is a spark plug socket because it's thin walled. So I'll whip these off, get the bars on, and that'll be the front end looking good. And then I think what I'll do is I'm going to give the whole outside a coat with the penetrol. I'll probably spend the rest of the afternoon putting the coats on, waiting for it to flash off, putting another coat on. I'm not sure if that's penetrol or something else. These were here before, some of these stains, because I've tried removing them gently, especially around the transfers. I don't want to ruin those, and they're not coming off, so I'm not going to force them. They're going to live there, they're going to stay there. It's oily rag. Thought I'd test out this oxyacetylene torch. There's acetylene ash all over the place now, but it does work. I've hooked it all up, sprayed it with soapy water to make sure there aren't any leaks. That all seems good. So let's see if I can here. It's got quite a big tip on it, so it's a bit tricky to light. I think the tip needs cleaning as well. But I think I'm almost out of acetylene. Yeah, so this is running very low pressure. Oh, that's why. that works quite nicely. Yeah, nice little torch. I'll have to see if I can get tips for it. I'd quite like to get a smaller one. Yeah, I think that was probably actually a really good find for $20, including the flashback arresters, which, as I say, are just these by themselves are about $60, $70 each. So that's good to know that works. And I've opened up the little foot pedal to see what's in there. It's just kind of a piece of brass, although it's probably there's a special sort of brass, beryllium brass or something like that that they use for electrical contacts. It's probably something like that, and all it does is makes contact here with these little springy fingers, which are kind of on an angle, so it progressively contacts each one of those, and that's how they do the variable speed. So 6 speeds, I guess. I'm not going to use that. I'll take all of that out and probably just replace it with a simple micro switch. But, I think if we put that through the evaporust, I'll get the electronics out of it. Just soak the whole thing in evaporust, get the surface rust off it, and do the same as the bike. I'll just penetrol it, leave it as that. I'm not going to repaint it. I think I can unscrew that by the looks of it, and unscrew these, strip the insides out, and yeah, clean it up. It's an interesting thing. It's got these coils, and then it's got these little springy arms. These are all spring steel. So, yeah, very interesting. And the good thing is, I think even if I convert this to use a modern micro switch, so it's just on and off, I think I can keep all of this in the box still. So it's all just still there. If somebody wants to put it back together in the future, they can always do that. I won't throw these out. I've been 3D printing little rubber grommets, or washers rather, for the radiator mounting bolts. They're these special shoulder bolts, and these have the sides cut off because they fit into little channels on the frame. While those have been printing, I've been remaking my inner liners for the saddlebags, or the panniers. These were steel, they're very heavy, and I didn't actually need to make all 4 sides because when they're in the bike, there's metal on the back. So I've remade them from aluminium. I need to make sure that's at 90 degrees. And I actually made them a little bit higher as well. These are 1/3 of the weight. I weighed them. So I've made them a little bit higher because then the cover fits better and it sits above the buckles. If you just let it sit naturally, you can't actually buckle this up because the flap covers the buckles. So that's going to look more square, I think. Nice and light, makes them keep their shape, looks clean. I think that'll work a lot better. So I'm just going to, using my lump of main trunk, straighten this back, bend this back a little bit. I had to, in my little folder, I did have to take some of the fingers out just to be able to get this out. You can sort of end up folding things in such a way that you can't get them out of the machine. I think you can dismantle the machine and pull the ends off and you could slide it out. But luckily I was able to remove some of the fingers so I could actually pull this thing out. But I will put those in place now. I might just sit them on the bike to see what they look like. But I don't think I'll bolt them in place now because they'll get in the way when I'm trying to put the power unit back in. they're going to look pretty good. I'm a bit annoyed that this particular leather strap's been stretched. There is actually a leather working place just around the corner, and I'm quite tempted to get them to make new straps for this, if they can make them look old. They're just kind of riveted in place. That's probably fine how it is, I think. Because I don't want things to look too new. I did use new nuts and bolts to bolt them on because it had such a weird collection of random things. So I've just used 3/16 Whitworth stove bolts, gutter bolts, and I've put some black paint over the top of them just so they don't stick out as brand new. And the nuts on the wrong side at the moment, of course. It'll go on the inside. But yeah, I think that piece of aluminium in there is going to help those keep their shape a lot better. What's next? I think I'm almost ready to actually start putting the two halves back together, but I may leave that for another day. We have a little bit of a clean up first, and I need to look at the seat cover, start playing with my sewing machine, see if I can get that to work. This is where I'm finishing up today. I've put the fuel tank down here to remind me not to forget to put it in before we reattach the power unit, because I think that would suck. So the fuel tank needs to go back in. I'll bolt the regulator back on. I think I should be able to get to everything I need to for the wiring, although I may wait until I've got my little bridge rectifier back, or when it arrives, so I know where that's going to go, but it'll go in there somewhere. I'm sure I had a little rubber grommet for the petrol tank, but I can't remember where I put it. I'm sure I bought one last time I ordered parts and the spares, but I'm about to do another order so I can get another one of those. I've put the little seat back on. That's like the back seat. Panniers are looking good. Seat springs, I just put them there so I don't lose them. Handles are good, not much play in them. There's a little bit, but that's not too bad. Might be able to tighten that up a bit. This one is tighter, so there isn't much play in it. Put this back on. This is to hold the warranty fitness. So the last time it was warranted is 2007. So what's that? 18 years? The earliest one, there's a whole bunch of old ones behind there. The earliest one of those I found was 1991. I think it's going to look okay. It retains its previous grimy look without the actual grime. So it's an honest used bike, I would say. This is the brake light switch. This is where one of the fuel tank mounts. So I think that's something somebody's added. The later bikes did have a brake light switch though. Panniers look good. See where the paint's been worn away. And I managed to keep all the original transfers and things. So I think I'll finish there. Well, it sounds like we finally have some rain, which is good. Hopefully it lasts a while. The other thing I did is I was trying to remove the gas tap, the valve from this old cylinder, and I just couldn't get the valve loose at all, so in the end I just cut it off. I did that outside very gingerly. I knew the tank was empty, and I'm pretty sure this is some sort of welding gas cylinder, so it's not explosive or anything, but I just carefully hacksawed through it, just to make sure there wasn't any release of pressure when I got through into the middle there. But no, there was nothing. It was fine, so I just chopped that off. the valve was no good anyway. The threads on it where you attach the gas hose were all mangled up, so I just left it like that, and I'll just use that as a kind of a dolly, I guess, or a sort of thing to hammer metal around. Should be quite useful. And I've looked everywhere for that little rubber grommet thing. Don't know where it would have gone. If I even ordered one, I'd have to check back in my list of parts to see if I even ordered one. But I'll add that to my new order, which I might do tonight, I think. It's Sunday today, and it is kind of raining, but not the sort of rain we need to refill the water tanks. It's just kind of miserable and dribbly. I pulled apart one of these regulators. As somebody rightly pointed out in the comments, acetone won't do anything to dissolve the potting, but if you soak them in boiling water, it goes all brittle, and you can sort of chip it away. So I've depotted one of these to see what's in it, and basically it's exactly the same as described by Big Clive 4 years ago. I'll post a link to his channel where he pulls one of these apart and he explains how the circuit works, but I'm not going to use this on the bike. It doesn't really work the way I would hope it would work. The battery charging is just done with a diode in series with the battery, so it doesn't really give you anything there. And the regulation part is just done by basically short-circuiting the output, the generator output coils. This is an SCR on the back that they use for switching. Like I say, he'll explain it on his channel much better than me. And it's exactly the same as he described 4 years ago, right down to the thing being filled with sand before they pour the resin in the top. So I wouldn't recommend using one of those. I've just bought a bridge rectifier locally, which will basically do exactly the same as the regulator, the selenium rectifier rather. I did test this. This is dead. So basically the wiring will be exactly as original apart from that replacement part. Which means you do control it via the switch, and you have to keep an eye on the load and make sure you're not going to boil your battery. But I think that should be fine. I'm going to leave it as 12 volts. I may eventually convert this back to 6 volts, but until I build the other bike, if I ever do build the other bike, because that bike is a complete bitzer and I just need to throw it together however works, what I would do is I would buy the 6 volt coils, put them back in this bike, and then all you have to do is change the battery and the bulbs, and use the 12 volt on the other bike. But until I'm ready to do that, I don't want to just buy the parts and have them sitting on the shelf and maybe never get used. So this will work. I'm going to go with this for now. The horn is fine, 6 or 12 volts, because it's such a limited contact on the horn, it's not going to burn it out or anything. And I did find that's the grommet that came out of this bike. That's the original one, so I've put that back. So I can probably get the fuel tank in today, which would be good. There's a little bit of a run there in the what's the stuff called? I've forgotten what it's called. The stuff, penetrol. So again, you can easily wipe that clean with a little bit of terps on a rag and then put a little bit more penetrol over the top. It's looking pretty good, I think. And I just did an order to the spares. It turned out not to be a very big order. Basically, a new clutch cable, new front brake cable. The throttle cable, mine is completely mangled, and it's not correct anyway. It's apparently way too long, and I think this has been made up from some sort of universal cable, so I'm going to do the same thing. I may be able to reuse bits of this, like the little adjuster in the middle, but I've got a universal cable kit coming, and that's because this isn't an original grip. So I suppose I could look for the original grip, but it's easy enough just to put this back, because that's what the bike came with, and it works. I forgot one thing, which is there's a little lever that goes on there, but I think it's just basically a bent piece of wire. That's what this bike came with. It'll be around here somewhere, and I can just replicate it. For the Miller switch, they do sell replicas of the switch, but I thought, well, I've got most of the bits off my switch. Let's just try epoxying it back together. So it's just sitting there with some epoxy. That'll hold all the pieces, and then I'll just sand it smooth. This is the dip switch. That's cleaned up really nicely. That works fine. It's just a little toggling contact. Even the original cable sheathing and stuff cleaned up nicely. I think I've lost my that little end cap thing. It's in the parts washer, so I'll fish around in there with a magnet. And this is what I used on the grommet, the fuel tank grommet. This gummy fledge stuff, which is meant to be good for reconditioning rubber. I thought this switch was broken. No, I thought there were bits chipped out of it on the bottom there, that little sort of triangular section. But no, that's part of the switch. That's to give you space for the wires to come out. So I think, yeah, I think fuel tank in next. And then maybe we can look at this. I'll need to drain the coolant out of this because I'll have to take the radiator off to be able to get this all back. The other thing is the gear knob. There's a little spider. Is it a spider? This has got flats milled on it, but those flats aren't there to hold the nut captive. So you can take this off. It's just on a spline shaft. The problem then is when you've put it back in, it's really hard to get a spanner on both sides because you need to hold one while you tighten the other, otherwise it just spins. So I'm kind of tempted to make a little, not captive nut, but something that holds in place there. The other thing I could do is actually just hold it with a drop of super glue, and then you get the top one in, and once you start getting it tight, it's not too bad. It'll tighten itself up. I'm not sure. Will I be able to get the clutch cable in place when this is all in the bike? I think so. The worst comes to worst, you just take the back wheel off and then you get access all up and through there. So I'm pretty sure I can assemble all of this because I think getting the body on is kind of a two-person job. It's tricky by yourself. Although I could maybe use my girder crane there and use that to go under the seat here with a strap, hold the back of the body up. Possibly, not sure, but yeah, I think drain the liquid out of this first. With head gardener's help, I've managed to wheel the front end back onto the power unit. It wasn't actually too bad getting it back on because nothing's connected, so it made it much easier. The strap here is to hold the handlebars so the front wheel doesn't flop around while you're trying to maneuver it. The tricky thing now is, one, these bolt on at the front, but with the oil filter there, I can't get the bolt through from the correct side. It's meant to go through from that direction. So I've just got the bolt in there to hold it at the moment. The other side is done up. So I'm going to have to remove the oil filter again, which probably means losing a bit of oil. I'm not sure. I may just be able to undo the top, undo these, and kind of bend it just a little bit out of the way. Then I can get that bolt through. The one that's really hard are these at the back. So these screws go through here. They go through the sort of bearing piece, and that can rotate, so you have to get all of that lined up. And then on the back there are these big plates with threads on them, so they're captive. So you kind of have to jiggle all of this around to get all the holes to line up, and then get this engaged on the threads on the back. I've managed to get one side done. The other side's a bit tricky. So kind of using screwdrivers to pull things into the correct place. And then I did the other side and then remembered I hadn't put any copper grease on things, so I had to undo it and do it again. But I've greased these bolts up, so I'm just about to get these on. Have the bike more or less back together. Yeah, those bottom ones are really tricky. And then I got it all back together and realised I'd left the rear shocks out, and getting them in place was a bit tricky with the pannier boxes in the way. So I ended up undoing the 2 screws at the back, and I was able to rotate them round, get them up out of the way so that you can get into that bolt up there. But, that's all done. The fuel system is plumbed in. I don't have any hose clamps, so it's all just kind of pushed in place at the moment. I think I might get some of those little springy wire type ones. I think those will be easier than typical screw type ones. I have a filter in there. This little water stub thing makes a convenient shelf to balance things on. Oil gauge is mounted up here for now. I'll figure out where that's going to go. I'll have to think something up. I think what I'll do is I'll make up a little bracket that clamps around this tube maybe. Will that work? I can't remember if the leg shields go in front of or behind that. I'd have to look. But if that tube is on the inside, I'll make a little bracket that mounts the oil gauge just down here so you can see it. This is the first time it's been running on the actual fuel tank, and that all seems to be working. Nothing seems to be leaking, which is amazing. Brake light switch, I did mount that a little differently. It was just hard up against the inside here before, and it was sort of bent a bit, so I put a nut behind there. What I need is a spring to go between there and there, a little piece of wire and a little spring. Haven't done the foot rest yet. Getting the radiator in was a bit of a pain. These are my little 3D printed buffers. To get the radiator in, I had to remove the carburetor, so you can sort of get it in that way, because it has to go in through the front, through the back behind these bars. It's full of coolant and antifreeze now. I started pouring the antifreeze in and realized, oh, this seems a bit thick, and then remembered it's concentrate, so I had to dilute it down. I'm just using 50% coolant. I've just noticed there's a little oil leak because I've finally been able to get this to run long enough. Oh, and of course it's leaking from the front, which is the one seal I didn't really look at because I didn't want to take all of that apart. That's typical, isn't it? We'll have to see how bad that is. So it might all be coming back apart again. But it's plumbed up. I still don't have all the wiring. I've just got the ignition hooked up. But this should... I keep forgetting you have to give it a little bit of throttle. Yeah, it's definitely dripping at the front. There's no coolant leaks, there's no fuel leaks. All pressure's good. call it done for today. Now I'm going to go look up how hard it is to replace that front oil seal without taking everything apart again. I'm not sure if it's possible or not. I have no idea why this throttle cable's so long. I'm going to make up my own. I don't have the gear lever in place yet, maybe because I don't have the clutch cable, so I'll wait until I've got the clutch, this way I don't accidentally knock it into gear. Disconnect that. Yeah, it was definitely with the choke off. Definitely no fuel leaking. This is the petrol tap. It's like a pull on off thing. Yeah, just that leak at the front. Not lots of oil. This is the water I tipped out of the radiator, so even though it's been flushed through multiple times, there's still crap in there. So I think once I get the bike running properly, I'll do a few cycles of flushing the water out. Coolant's relatively cheap, so I think it'll be worth doing that. Yeah, I think we can call that a success. Some reasonably good news on the front oil seal. I don't have to strip everything down. I think you can get to it from the front. The trick is getting the flywheel off, and that means getting it off the taper. I actually have the oil seal, so that's good. That's it there. And this fits. If we look on my spare engine, there's a sort of retainer there, so it fits under that. So if you can get the flywheel off, you can get to that, and then you've got the oil seal there. There is a centralizing tool apparently, but I should be able to 3D print a little plastic guide to do that. The tricky thing is going to be getting the flywheel off. So the flywheel is, there's a thread on it, and there's a special tool that you thread onto it, and then there's another bolt that goes in the end and pushes on the end of the crankshaft. There's another tool that screws on the end of the crankshaft so that the bolt pushing on it doesn't damage the threads, because that's where the advanced retard unit goes. So I think what I may need to do is make that tool. And the really good thing is, of course, with the spare engine, I have enough bits there that I can look at my spare engine and make the tool to fit that, so that when it comes time to do the seal on the bike, I can easily pop the flywheel off, do what I need to do, and then put it all back together. But, yeah, that's the seal, and it's like a couple of gaskets. Yeah, 2 gaskets. So at least I've got it, which is good, because I've just done an order to the spares and I didn't want to have to do another one and pay another 10 quid for shipping. But no, the bike's, it's looking good, I think. It's I might actually wheel it outside. Wow. No, maybe not, because it's not completely finished. Let's wait till it's completely finished. Yeah, it's looking like a machine again. Obviously I still need to do the seats and things like that, but we'll get to that.